Society expects men to deal with pain pretty much by ignoring it. Now, this has been physical pain through most of history. If you believe the old westerns, all you need is a pint of whiskey and a stick to bite down on, and you can endure just about anything. And this might be true for physical pain, and I think that, men have been shown to endure a great deal of physical discomfort and pain. But somehow this concept is carried over to psychological and emotional pain. And that's an area where we don't do so well, because enduring this emotional or psychological pain doesn't really resolve it in any way at all. And in fact, it definitely makes it a lot worse. And it becomes this covert agent that's occupying your subconscious mind that screws up your whole life. And you're completely unaware of it. Because you're oblivious to the pain, you don't realize the impacts that it's having in every part of your life. So today I want to talk about that pain in particular, and how you can become a little less oblivious to it, maybe even embrace it a little bit, and move through it as quickly as possible. So let's talk about it. Most men deal with emotional pain by walking away from it, by turning their back and literally acting like it doesn't exist and just moving away from it as quickly and efficiently as possible. Unfortunately, that's exactly the wrong thing to do. There's an old, American Indian or Native American observation about pain or about storms, in that the buffalo always walk toward the storm. And the reason they walk toward the storm is so they can get through it faster. And I think that's the strategy that we need to take when it comes to dealing with the emotional pain from loss, in particular from divorce or the loss of a relationship or any of that stuff. Because by turning your back and walking away from it, we tend to just make it worse. Because by burying it in deeply into our subconscious, the negative influence it has on our life is just exponential, and it can cause you to, of course, not only to struggle with relationships for your whole life, but it can even wreck your career, it can wreck your peace of mind, it can make it difficult for you to accomplish anything, much less have a happy, enjoyable, fulfilling life. So resolving these things is critically important. What men frequently do in walking away is the first thing they do is they get angry. Anger is simply a cover for unresolved grief. That's basically what it is. And I've certainly been a victim of it myself. I've certainly experienced a lot of anger as opposed to grief. But it's not helpful in the long run. And it's really critically important to identify that anger as unresolved grief, because then you'll know. Like if you're still carrying a lot of anger towards your ex, there's probably some unresolved issues there that you need to work through. And if you don't work through them, well, they're just going to get worse. It's not going away. I mean, that anger festers inside you, and it becomes really problematic. Not just in your relationships and in your jobs and all that stuff, but it actually can affect your physical health in significant ways. Science is finding that when you carry around a lot of anger and resentment and all these negative emotions, that they frequently manifest in some terrible, terrible diseases. It's like unresolved trauma. I remember there was a study that was done where they looked at two groups of children. One group had been traumatized when they were young because of abuse, and the other group had not been. And the group that had been traumatized died on average about 10 years younger than the group that had not been traumatized. And they'd had all kinds of diseases. It wasn't just from alcoholism or drug addiction or all that stuff. They died from regular diseases like cancer and heart disease and all that stuff. So getting that unresolved crap out of your body is critical to your physical health and well-being. No one goes into a marriage or any long-term relationship with the intention of it ending or getting a divorce. We all expect that we have done a reasonably good job of picking someone that we think is a good partner for us, and we put a lot of time, energy, thought, emotional energy into the success of the relationship. And when it fails, even if things are really bad at the end of that relationship, there is a sense of failure that goes with it. And as men, failing is a tough thing for us to swallow sometimes. Sometimes that pure act of failing at any endeavor can lead us down a path of self-destructive thought. It becomes a self-talk, a negative self-talk that gets reinforced over and over and over again. And it can turn into shame and, just a lot of really negative energy. As humans, we tend to have a negative bias anyway. It's a self-preservation thing. We're always watching for something that's not right. And that negative bias tends to really screw us up in modern society because we're not surrounded by threats like we were, hundreds or thousands of years ago. And so that negativity bias causes us to sort of obsess about things that are negative. In addition to that, we have something called a confirmation bias. We're always out looking for reasons to believe what we believe. And that is true in, just about anything. It can be politics, it can be religion, it can be, science, it can be anything you want. And of course, in today's society, when you've got so many voices screaming about one thing or another, you can find confirmation on any thought or belief that you have. But when it comes to loss, and you combine it with that negative bias, that negativity bias, then you throw confirmation bias on top of it, well, now you're just confirming for yourself that you should be ashamed, that you are a failure, that your life does suck. And it becomes really, really hard to get past that. Now, like I said earlier, as men, we tend to internalize this stuff. We do not talk about it. We do not express these emotions outwardly because they are embarrassing. They're not socially acceptable. These are things that men endure. And unfortunately, that endurance leads to shortened lifespans and higher stress levels and all kinds of negative stuff, much less fulfilling lives in general. So getting that negativity out is really, really critical. And like I mentioned earlier, rather than walking away from the storm of emotional pain, you really got to turn around and walk toward it. Because when you push through this stuff and you really just embrace the pain at the time, you take the stick in your mouth and you bite down and you just push through it, you can resolve it once and for all. And once it's resolved, you're going to feel an awful lot better. And you'll find not only that, but you're going to have grown from it. You're going to develop some skills that will serve you well in the future, because being able to actually manage this pain correctly and deal with it in an effective way makes you more impervious to it in the future, because now you know that you can handle it. And if you're walking away from it, you're really just running from the fight, is basically what it boils down to. And the next time that fight comes up, you're going to walk away again. You're going to walk away again. And inevitably, you're just going to become incapable of having any kind of relationship, or even endeavoring into any kind of project where failure might be a possibility. And that's going to paralyze you throughout your entire life. So you can't just keep walking away from the pain. You've got to turn around and walk into it. The first phase of a relationship failing usually occurs while the relationship is still alive and active. And you kind of know something's not right. But you may have tried talking about it with her, you may have tried working things out, but it's not working out. And I know that in my own relationship, it became clear that this was irreconcilable, that we were not going to solve this problem. But ironically, to the world, publicly, we put on the face of everything's just fine. I mean, we would hold hands in public, we still kissed each other goodbye and hello in front of the children. We were just going through the act of having a marriage. We were no longer really having a marriage. I mean, our relationship had really broken down to a large degree, but to the outside world, we wanted to make it look like everything was just fine. And I remember when we were selling our house, the realtor came to us after our settlement and said, you know, I admire you guys so much because you've been married so long and you seem so affectionate and loving to one another. And I thought, oh my God, I should be getting the Academy Award. I mean, I am obviously one of the best actors on the planet because this woman lives in our neighborhood, the realtor does, and we see her all the time. And she was convinced that we were happily married. All the while, you know, we were talking about divorce the entire time. So, yeah, going through that process of faking it, I think, is how it gets started. So you don't want anyone else to know about it. There's some shame involved just right there. I mean, just the fact that you're hiding the fact that your relationship is failing tells you that there's some shame in this endeavor, that you're experiencing shame at this time. And that's incredibly unhealthy. Shame is probably the single most destructive emotion you can feel. And so as you start feeling shame, you got to become aware of it and just say, no, I'm not going down that path. Later I'm going to get into it a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit right now about metacognition, just sort of introduce this concept to you. Metacognition is the ability to observe your own thoughts. And it's an interesting concept. This is something that really identifies or differentiates humans from all other animals on the planet. So Shelby and Jax, they are conscious beings. There's no question about it. They experience things. They have fear. They have, you know, affection. They have happiness, joy, whatever. But they don't have the ability, at least in my mind, to observe their own thoughts, to have an emotion or a thought, and then from a different place be able to observe that thought and decide how that thought is being experienced within them. We as humans have that ability, and that is where you have to go when you're going through negative emotions. You've got to be able to identify that this emotion is happening and then be able to metacognitively identify the thoughts or the beliefs that you're holding that are causing you to feel this emotion. When you can do that, and this is not something that a lot of people have a lot of practice with, but when you can do that, you can significantly impact or change the impact that emotions have on you, because you can change the thoughts that go with them. You can change the belief system, the narrative that goes with those emotions, so that you're not reasserting these shameful, negative ideas into your consciousness and making you feel like you are a failure, because that just compounds the problem over and over and over again. And then, of course, if you just walk away from all that negativity and you don't do anything about it, well, it becomes embedded in you. It just becomes part of your identity. And that's worst case scenario. Relationships are a special situation, though, because relationships represent a lot more to us than just the social contract of being married. When you go into that relationship, you're probably looking to heal some wounds that you've had in the past. At least that's the way a lot of people go, you know, where that having that partner, having that wife, that companion in life is a form of validation that we probably are unconscious of, but maybe we are conscious of it, that you are seeking to show the world that you are lovable, that you are socially acceptable, that you are part of society. And this relationship is a symbol of that you are a lovable human being, that you have been able to fit in with society at large. And when that relationship fails, that validation that you are a lovable person, that you are someone who deserves love, is undercut. You know, it kind of comes crashing down around you. Psychologically, it becomes more than just a failure. I mean, like if you start a business and it fails, yeah, that's tough and it sucks, and you don't like losing money or wasting time on something that doesn't work. But When you are in a marriage that fails, it's so much deeper. You know, it hits you like back in your childhood trauma when your mother didn't feed you or something. You know, she didn't give you the attention, she gave it to your siblings or whatever. There's some trauma from when you didn't have the ability to manage those kinds of things that's probably deeply embedded into your subconscious mind that is driving a lot of these behaviors. And when you're confronted with the rejection of from the person that you love the most in the world, the person who is the center of your universe, the person that you have trusted with all of your most dark secrets, the person who knows you better than anyone in the world, when you are rejected by that person, the consequences are far more severe than I think that any of us are willing to accept, because it digs deep. It hits you in the places that you can't even imagine. You know, like you don't even know you have pain in those places, but now they hurt. And you don't know where it's coming from or why it's coming, but it's debilitating to many people, to many men especially. Women have this ability, of course, to talk about these things, and they have other women who will show compassion to them under these circumstances. And they will seek these people out, and they'll tell their whole story. They'll just talk about it and talk about it and talk about it until there's nothing left to talk about it. And it does seem to give them some level of relief. But men do not have that kind of community or that kind of opportunity most of the time. At least most men don't. I think that there are groups out there, and of course you can go to see a therapist and all that, but it's really tough to kind of provide some level of relief unless you are really acutely aware of the experience that you're having and realize that it is much more profound than what you even believe. I'm sure a lot of you guys, and I've seen it in the comments, have experienced something similar to what I experienced at the end of my relationship. Yeah, there was this acute level of pain and disorientation as it was falling apart. And really, for me, it probably wasn't as acute as it is for some people, because I knew it was falling apart for years. So I had been carrying around a chronic level of stress and pain for probably a decade before my marriage ended. And so when it finally ended, although there was a spike in the pain that I experienced at that time, it was followed shortly thereafter by a sense of relief that she was gone, and that I didn't have that acute or that chronic level of stress associated with being around her all the time. That sense of relief that comes is a bit of a mirage, because you think, I feel so much better. I must be okay. Yeah, just because you feel a little better probably doesn't necessarily mean you've resolved it. And it's better to feel better. Don't get me wrong. The relief is a wonderful experience, and I'm not going to downplay it at all. It's an enormous step in the right direction. But it's almost like, like someone's got 500 pounds sitting on your chest, and they remove 200 pounds. And you're like, oh my God, that feels so much better. But you're still carrying 300 pounds on your chest, You're not there yet, And I think that's the problem that we experience, is we think that relief is a sign that we're okay. And I think it's a sign that you're like headed in the right direction when you feel that sense of relief and you can identify it and you can enjoy it. But it's not necessarily the end of the game. It's not necessarily, you haven't won yet. There's probably still some stuff that you need to work through. And I followed that path exactly. I felt an enormous sense of relief. And I thought, okay, I'm going to be fine, until I started getting into relationships with women, and I could tell that I wasn't there yet. Although I was working on, forgiving my ex-wife for her behaviors and trying to, see the experience from her perspective, I didn't want to, carry around a lot of anger and bitterness toward her. But underneath it all, still had that, and even I think to this day, there's still a tiny bit of that bitterness that still lives in there. And I don't know that I'll ever necessarily get over it as much as I try to. But having an awareness for it makes it a lot easier for me to identify it when it pops up, and to work through what exactly is going on there. Why am I still carrying that around? Because as I see her now, I mean, she's a mess of a human, and I have compassion for her on a lot of levels. Not that I want her back in my life at all, but I can see that she's someone that I knew, that we were close, and she's suffering a lot. And yes, I can definitely have some compassion for what she's going through. And I guess maybe that's a sign of healing. I don't know. But it's definitely better than just carrying around the bitterness and the anger and being vengeful, you know. All right, so what's the cure? How do you get through this thing? Well, a lot of it is going to have to come down to just identifying the underlying cause. And the thing that a lot of men struggle with is strong emotion. And of course, love is, without question, the strongest emotion. And when we are seeking out a partner, we're looking for this external validation, but we're also looking for love. And seeking love externally is a fallacy. We are fooling ourselves. We're convincing ourselves that we can be loved. If we can be loved, then we are lovable. And that is not the correct way to look at this. It's the same thing that I mentioned earlier with happiness. It's like happiness has to come from within. It's something you bring to the game. It's not something that you get here. You bring happiness into a marriage. You don't get happiness from a marriage. You bring love into a marriage. You do not get love from a marriage. If you look at it that way, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. That the love and the validation is something that you need to give to yourself. And you do this by just identifying those characteristics that you appreciate about yourself. And we're all unique in many respects, and we all bring different things to the table. But you're going to have to really spend some time focusing in on those things that make you unique, that make you valuable to the people in your life, that make you enjoy your own company. You know, getting to that place where you feel comfortable in your own skin, that you know who you are as a man, that you feel good about the person that you are, that you feel good about the relationships that you have, that you realize love is something that is given and it cannot be taken. I think that as a relationship fails and we feel that love being withdrawn from our partner, if you're unable to fill that void through love for yourself and the understanding that you have for yourself and the compassion that you can show yourself under those circumstances, and understand that any actions that you took during that marriage were the best that you could do at that time, you know? Not necessarily the best you could do at any time, but the best you could do at that time. And you give yourself that little bit of compassion and that little bit of understanding, it makes it a lot easier. One of the great things about being a parent, especially to daughters, is they come to me for help all the time. Oftentimes that help takes the form of cash, but frequently it comes with advice. They want some advice. They want help. They want to understand what's going on in their lives and what they should be doing and how they behave. And of course, as girls, they're very emotional. You know, they come to me in tears and they're very upset, or I can tell that their lives are not going the way they want. And sometimes these little events that occur in their lives seem like, the end of the world. But it gives me the opportunity to see the human condition from a different perspective, and to be able to reassure them that they are indeed lovable, that they do have a lot to bring to the table, that they have a lot to offer, not just a partner, but for themselves and who they are. And they don't need someone externally to have a fulfilling life, that they can be very happy and live a fulfilling life without the need for a relationship. And ironically, it's only when you get to that place, when you realize that you can lead a fulfilling life without another person in it, you don't need someone else to validate you, that you don't need this external source of love, that you have an internal source for yourself. It's when you get to that point that then you become way more lovable. You become way more attractive. You become much more likely to have a legitimately good, happy, loving relationship. It's very easy to point your finger outwards when things fail. It's very easy to say she was a nut job, she was a narcissist, she was, borderline. And all those things could be true. All of them could be true. But at the end of the day, you still must take responsibility for your experience. This is your experience. She's having her experience. You're having your experience. It doesn't mean that you're a failure because you're having this experience. It just means that this experience has something in it for you, and you need to grow from it. If you don't grow from it, if you don't figure it out, guess what? You're going to do it all again. So take this opportunity to figure it out. And inevitably, in almost all of these situations, it comes down to a lack of self-love and self-compassion and understanding this experience, not only from your own perspective, but from the perspective of the other person. And we allow our emotions to get involved, and we become angry, as I mentioned earlier, and vengeful. And those just cloud our ability to actually achieve any personal growth because they're all externally focused. That anger and that vengefulness is an externally focused thing. And you're never going to figure it out because the problem isn't out there. Just like the happiness isn't out there, the problem isn't out there either. The problem is in here. It's inside you. You've got to figure this out, and you've got to fix yourself because you can't fix anyone else. So when your marriage ends, it is like a death. It's very much like something has died or someone has died, and it's very, very hard to deal with that death. But it's not just the relationship that's died. It's the role that you played in that relationship. It's who you were in that relationship has also died. Now, some of us, through turning our back on this whole experience and not dealing with it, we will revive that corpse and we will drag it into the next relationship and we will be that guy again. Don't do that. Let that part of you die. Let that needy one searching for external validation and the need for a relationship, let that anxiety-ridden guy go. Do not drag that guy up out of the grave of your last relationship and bring him into your next relationship, because that guy is going to fuck it up again. You need to let that guy go with the relationship. You need to, first of all, identify who he was, because he's obviously a part of you. There's some aspect of you that was in that relationship. When whatever the negative qualities of that role were, that's not who you are. That's just who you were at that time. That's just the role that you were playing in that relationship at that time. And if you can identify the characteristics of that character that you were playing in that relationship, and you can see the negative qualities that that guy brought to that relationship and contributed to the failure of that relationship, well, then you can once and for all just let that guy go. You don't need to bring that guy on anymore. In fact, you can bury him in an unmarked grave and walk away and never go back to that site again, because you don't need that stuff. This whole experience has been about shedding a lot of those characteristics and allowing you to become more authentic to yourself and to the people around you. By just being yourself, your true, authentic self, you're much more likely to have fulfilling relationships. By pretending to be somebody and acting in ways that are not truly authentic to you, you're going to find relationships are much more likely to self-destruct. And people say, well, I don't know if the way I was acting is authentic or not authentic. Is that me or is that not me? Well, the real you is completely comfortable and happy in his own skin. The real you is very accepting of other people. The real you is very accepting of yourself. The real you doesn't need anyone outside of you to make you happy. You bring happiness to the table. It's there inside you. Because we are unwilling to accept that those qualities are in us and part of us, we frequently create an avatar that we pretend to be in a relationship because we want them to think something about us. And that avatar then comes with all these other characteristics that we're kind of pulling out of the air or from some other experience. And that's going to be self-destructive. That's not going to lead you to a place where you're going to be successful in a relationship. Looking for validation outside of yourself is obviously the biggest problem. So if you're just going through a divorce or a breakup of any kind, jumping right back into the dating scene is a terrible idea. Do not do that. Because, like I said, you're just dragging that old avatar along with you, and you're just going to experience exactly the same thing. Walking into this storm means you're going to have to face the reality of your part in the destruction of this relationship, and you're going to have to understand who you were in that relationship and how it contributed to this loss. You're going to have to suspend judgment. Judgment and shame are destructive emotions, and they will not help you in any way at all. So, beating yourself up is the wrong way to go. You identify what these conditions were that you brought into that relationship that may have contributed to its failure. And you have to have compassion for the guy that you were at that time. You got to, we were talking about burying the corpse, but at the same time, before you can bury the corpse, you've got to identify what was it about that role that you were playing that wasn't working. Why did you do that? Why did you act in those ways? Why did you have those feelings at that time? Dig deep into it. See if you can figure it out. More often than not, it simply comes down to some level of self-hatred, or self-loathing, where you don't have confidence in who you are. You don't believe in yourself. You don't think you can do it. You're not 100% happy with your authentic self, or you don't know how to find your authentic self. There's something in there, and it's different for everyone, but you've definitely got to kind of peel it back and see what's there. It's not going to cure it right away, but if you can identify what it is and you can have an awareness for what it is, you can have some control over it. And that's the most important part, is finding those levers of control for those conditions, those emotions, those behaviors that are self-destructive or are not compatible with a healthy relationship, and are not compatible with you being your authentic self. When you can get there and you can find that stuff, then you're golden, because now you have an awareness for it. And now we can move back into the metacognition and we can understand what's going on. We can see these thoughts and these feelings happening before us, and we have some control by just identifying them when they happen. And then I've talked about it in other videos, like I would say, I'm just not going to have that thought right now. And you can do that for a while, but you can also then question yourself about that thought. Like, why is that thought happening? Where did that thought come from? Why am I having this feeling? Where is it coming from? And if you can't find the answers to these questions, or you're really struggling to find the answer to these questions, then having a therapist or someone like that to talk to help flesh this out a little bit might be really, really valuable. But you've got to kind of dig down there and get this shit out. Otherwise, it's going to come back and come back and come back. And when I work with clients, whether they be coaching clients for health or just life coaching clients, repetition in people's behaviors over long periods of time seems to be very commonplace. These are behaviors that people don't like. They're giving them outcomes that are not favorable. Yet they continue to have these same experiences over and over and over again. And they may not be exact, but they're similar enough that the only common denominator in this experience is you. Like, you're it. Like, you're the one who's in this. You're the one who's having this experience over and over and over again. There's something in it for you to figure out. You've got to peel back the layers, be aware of when these things are happening, and go inside and see, where is that really coming from? What are you afraid of? What Where are you lacking love for yourself? Where do you lack acceptance for yourself? Where is the lack of compassion for yourself? Where is the self-loathing? What is it in this that is preventing you from getting past it? Why do you keep having this experience reoccur over and over and over again? Talking about strong emotions is very difficult for men. And, that pint of whiskey and that stick, we just numb the pain and then grit our way through it. That might work, in old Western movies. Maybe it works out on the battlefield. But in the battle or the battles of love and emotion and relationships, it doesn't work. That's not going to work. In fact, all you're doing is you're making it worse. The most critical thing that I think most people overlook, and I said this earlier, is that love can only be given. Love is kind of the energy that drives the universe. And I'm not talking about romantic love here. I'm talking about a benevolent ability and desire to experience harmony in one's life, and in the world as a whole. And that love, like I said, can only be given. And the only place that you can get it regularly, for sure, is from yourself. So having a healthy, respectful appreciation for yourself, a love for yourself, not in some weird narcissistic way, I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about a healthy appreciation for who you are as a man will do more for healing your past wounds than any other thing that you can do. And that requires that you stop judging and stop feeling shame, because those emotions are only going to dig that hole so much deeper and make it so much harder for you to climb out and to finally have a life that you enjoy and feel a sense of being whole. All right, you guys, I hope this video has been interesting, educational, maybe even entertaining. If it has, please let me know in the comments. I love reading all your comments. And in the meantime, stay healthy, and if you can, stay single.